In this video I wanted to do an overview of all of the ProDesk HP models. So there are many different ways to play, but the ProDesk is one of the common ways. But we do have 3 different options. Which one will be the best one for you when it comes for playing around with the emulation itself? So stay tuned and let's find out. So we do have the Intel and AMD version, but all of them are actually Intel today. So the ProDesk version comes in many variations, but I just wanted to check out what's going on when it comes to the 3 models. So all of the 3 will have, let's say, an option to do emulation, basic stuff, think about 8-bit and 16-bit stuff. But there's one particular option that I find really interesting. That actually has to do with these 2 models. So depending on the space of the function you wanted to do, we have like this big model, this ProDesk, this like absolutely massive, like your typical, let's say, desktop PC. But also we have like a little bit of a middle model that actually have both of the option to add a GPU. And that part is going to be really interesting. So I've been doing upgrades of GPUs, and they are like super beneficial if it comes to having emulation and doing a little bit upscaling. So you can actually see that the brackets are the same. So that's something we're not, let's forget it, because we need to look at the PCB format. You can actually see that this is like a super compact format, and this is one of the things that we're going to be needing for this model over here. And when it comes to, let's say, the more like compact design graphic cards, yeah, they are going to be limited. And not only power, but also when it comes to the price and everything. So this is a little bit more expensive sometimes and difficult to find. So what we're going to be having over here, like the GTX 1050, we have 1060, and the GE cards are like super inexpensive now. But we're going to be needing a space. And with space when it comes to overall the length of the card, but also when it comes to the height. And you know, this big boy is actually having the option to implement a graphics card like this. And the performance are absolutely mind-blowing. But first, let's start with the tiny ProDesk. Let's do a quick overview of emulation, what is, let's say, going on inside, what can we put in these machines, and what is actually possible. Absolutely slim and beautiful design, and they are quite robust when it comes to the ProDesk. At the front we're finding 2 USB ports, and headphone jack out for actually the speakers, and an on and off switch. At the back we're finding a display port, then we're having a VGA port and also multiple USB ports. And this is going to be great because we do have 2 speed ports and we can use them for an external hard drive for Botacera, 2 normal ports for controllers and RJ45 and the input for the power supply. So yeah, that doesn't really explain why this is another rabbit hole. Let me explain why. So this is an i5 and we have all kinds of different generations, and this is the biggest rabbit hole of these ProDesk. We have an old and a new version. I already did a video about the old version. This is the new one. You can see it with the, let's say, black and silver front. However, we do have the i3, the i5 and i7. I have the i5 and made the decision with this, just a simple reason. This is the best for your value when it comes for your money, because some of the i7 models and the newer chips, they are going to be so much expensive. Think about like hundreds, over maybe $200-300 freaking dollars for a mini PC, and it's just too much. Inside the kit we're just going to get a power supply and nothing else, because this is a huge product and prices is going to be quite difficult to explain, because where my marketplace over here, my country, we can find these things for, let's say, around $100. It can be different in the US or maybe in UK or another part of the world, and what kind of platform. Marktplaats, that's the part I'm using, has like very cool vendors with cheap prices, but eBay is going to be most of the time quite expensive. So a couple of different ways you can actually emulate games on a device like this. So here you have a couple of, say, differences. So first of all, we can just make yourself or buy yourself a USB thumb drive, and yeah, they are like 3.0 or even faster, but always double check if you have the speed ports. You're going to be plugging this in and going to be loading up your emulators and games through there. Okay, so this is another cool way to play, but it's more like an easy plug and play solution to bring with you. But yeah, USB drives with 5 and 12 GB are not cheap to buy. You can get yourself an old hard drive, like say make a Botacera drive and just slap it inside the machine. That is another way to go to. Or in my case, use an external drive. But in here we do have 2 different options. So let me explain. So when it comes to playing retro games, you have actually 2 ways to go to. So just to make it easy, we have 2 hard drives. The white one over here, it comes with, let's say, a launcher. You have a launch box, you even have Hyperspin, and also when it comes to RetroBat. What you're going to be doing, you're going to be plugging this thing in, installing all the needed DirectX files and all the other stuff. We're going to make a separate video about it, and we're going to be installing this on the Windows part. So we're going to be using both of them. But in this case, I just want to focus on making a retro emulation beast on a budget way. So we're going to be using a different drive, and this is going to be the Batocera drive. We're going to be using it externally, but you also can build it in it. And what you're going to be doing is not using Windows at all. We're going to be powering it on, loading up the hard drive, and have like a crazy amount of games to play. But how far we can push it and what kind of CPU we're having today, let's chit chat, let's connect everything, and let's have some fun. Like every single review almost, I'm going to be connecting my 8-Pro 360 controller. You can find those on AliExpress very cheap, the aftermarket ones, and they work great. So the device has been plugged in, booted up into Batocera, and yeah, you can do a different configuration. That we can have like this plug and play where we can switch between Windows. So if you're going to be removing and reboot it, you get into Windows, plugging it back in, and if you have set it to USB boot first, you will have the Batocera drive set up. But let's do a chit chat about it and what can we actually play. That's not what we're going to be checking out. So first of all, 29 Celsius is quite good for this HP, because I've been looking into different mini PCs, most of them getting up 45 Celsius. So cooling wise, this thing is absolutely great. We're using over here the i5, the 6th generation 6600T CPU. And the reason why I went for this particular model, because yeah, it was just really cheap to buy. And if you're getting like in the 8th generation, somehow they're like asking 150, even over 200 freaking dollars here. It's like nuts. However, we have a CPU count of 4, or at least like CPU number or the cores itself. So the overall specs are not bad, but let's see how far we can push it with some emulation itself. So we're going to be looking into the list of the kind of games you can play. It's absolutely nuts. However, I just want to check out some Tekken, MAME, stuff like that, because that doesn't run on cheap boxes most of the time. And I'm also going to be deep diving into some PlayStation stuff. What can we upscale with the, for example, the N64? Can we upscale it to 1080p or maybe even 4K? Because this i5 is a little bit older, but it is still maybe powerful enough to run our favorite games in also higher resolution. Of course, we do have some limitations, but we're going to be deep diving and finding them here. So when it comes to playing some Killer Instinct, this runs perfectly without no problem whatsoever. I can still remember that I actually played this on the Xbox Classic for the first time in emulation, but now having the option with just a cheap mini PC to actually run this. However, you can even run this with, let's say, lower end mini PCs like a dual core or a very old, let's say, 2nd generation i5. So Mortal Kombat 1 was, for example, one of my favorite games to actually test on those, let's say, Pandora's boxes, simply because this was like the ultimate game we can actually test. But it runs, of course, without any problem, like thousands of other games on a mini PC with Batocera. So if you just want to get into some MAME gaming, this is just a very cool way to actually do that. Every single Gamebox review I mentioned that we couldn't play Tekken, the MAME version. Most of the time only the PlayStation version, where that game is just great as it is. However, the MAME is just a real arcade version, and this runs perfectly. So, but let's move into some other Tekken games like Tekken Tag, because that was a system that could not even play it on many Super Console X PC. And back in the day when I actually started making these videos about them, like the emulation in general. But at this point we don't have any issue whatsoever when it comes for playing the MAME Tekken games. Even the Tekken Tag runs full speed, no problem whatsoever. And I also tried it on, let's say, some basic systems like an old i5, and they even had the option to actually run this. So this is not a problem for this CPU i5 6th generation. Yeah, so when it comes to the Panasonic 3DO, this is another system that is difficult to emulate on those Android game boxes with EmuElec most of the time. And another thing I noticed that this is one of those mini PCs that does no problem whatsoever. Did notice some differences between the loading time, because some PC is a little bit faster than the other one. But beside that, when it comes to emulation performance, we can actually run this game like Return to Fire. Let's see if it dips down. I must point out that I'm not running the latest emulator when it comes to this. But beside that, it seems to be working just fine as it is. So this is one of those many games I also wanted to try out besides playing on my original 3DO. It's just fun to emulate and to have this on the collection. And this seems to be running just fine now. But moving into some more emulators like the Atomic Wave do have great emulation performance. Here it doesn't even matter which game I'm going to be playing, and I find this Demolish Fish such a weird game. But beside that, it is going to be a great overall experience with Atomic Wave, Dolphin Blue and other games. And with arcade, we're so far not I think a lot of restrictions when it comes to that. Sorry. But let's switch between drives and let's hook up a new drive of Battlesera to get the best emulators and best performance. Because sometimes getting a newer emulator and also a Battlesera version, we can have, let's say, the overall better performance on also old school chips, where this is still in 6000 model. But let's mess with some rendering resolution, because the Dreamcast will run just fine. Holding the A button with this version, we can get into the advanced game option. This way you can also use select if I'm saying it correctly. And yeah, in here we can finding the rendering resolution, and the rendering resolution has been set to 4K, but it is not going to be a great overall experience. So let's go to 1920 by 4040 when it comes to that, and I would not be surprised that we do have an overall great emulation performance there. So I did notice with starting up the game, I did see some stuttering here and there. So when it comes to the overall performance, I think the Full HD is the maximum we can push this thing because of the 6th generation i5. But the question remains, of course, if you want to get into some Dreamcast emulation, do you think it's really worth it, the upscaling itself? And that is one of the things you need to ask, because there are many different cheap devices now that can actually play Dreamcast without any problem whatsoever. So you can just pay a fraction of the cost. But again, if you just want to have like some overall good emulation with a little bit of upscaling, a mini PC like this is just the way to go to. So moving on into some Sega Saturn. Having been set to 1080p with Die Hard, the arcade, it was also a very difficult game to emulate and had a lot of struggles with those cheaper game boxes, but just actually cool that we can just play this and even have the option with a little bit of upscaling using the Yaba Shinshiro emulator. And also you can also tweak a little bit with it, what kind of emulator works best for you. But so far I can see this is just great. I will not even push it a little bit further. Yeah, we can try 2K, 4K and whatsoever, but it's highly possible it's going to be stuttering like crazy, because then we're going to be pushing it over its limits and having not the experience we actually want. And 1080p looks kind of good when it comes to that. 1080p with N64. So we do have a little bit more power than the cheap ones I've been checking out. So I mean, particularly when it comes to this old school, I think I even tested out an i5 with a 2nd generation and a dual core. And they had the option to actually play some N64, but most of them just on native and sometimes 480 depending on the game. But now we can even play this on 1080p upscale, but you can see it just froze. Okay, that's kind of cool to see. Can we reset it? No. Oh, there we go, there we go, there we go. Okay, wait, what? I don't know what's going on. We could also... Okay, it's not going well. So let's reset it and let's try that again with a different setting, because that was not the way how we wanted to play. So what we can actually do is going all the way up to all the settings. Let's put it to 960 by 720. And let's try that again. And that is what I mean when it comes to tweaking, you know. This is just it's absolutely crazy if you think about it. We can play so many different games on one freaking PC. However, you always need to do a little bit of a tweaking. So what is the best option for your setup? Besides having the different Intel chipsets with different generations. Okay, so let's get into it. If it still freezes, it means it's not something to do with the rendering resolution. Yeah, so that runs a little bit better. Okay, a little bit better. It doesn't even freeze now. Can be an accident, but I think it not. It got a message from shaders, something went completely wrong. But this is one of the many things that you need to take note. Yeah, just get a little bit of knowledge about Battlesera and just sometimes messing with it if you have some problems with your favorite game. But we still needed to try another N64 game. So if let's say the correct resolution was 920 by 4040, but you can see that it actually freezes. So this is not going to be an overall good experience upscaling it to so far. You can see it freezes, but just do a little bit of a gameplay. No, this is just not the way how you want to go. It does look absolutely amazing on higher resolution when it comes to that, but no. We push it to the maximum level. But let's get into some GameCube with 1080p upscaled resolution, and whoa, this looks absolutely great. It's just awesome to see that we can do a little bit upscaling of GameCube at this point. And with some tweaking, different games, we have different results. So let's say if you have an F-Zero X, it's possible you can only render that on 480 or 720p. Just wanted to give like a random game I love to play, Soul Calibur, I love this franchise. And yep, this looks great. And maybe you can do a little bit of more tweaking, getting even better result with rendering resolutions. But so far, I think this is just great, and this is just a great balance, but having a stable 60 frames per second. So with the PlayStation part, PlayStation 1 4K rendering resolution. So that is the highest I have been on, let's say, these cheaper game box emulation Battlesera mini PCs. And you can just actually see that the i5 6th generation seems to be handling it just fine. So with a lot of, let's say, dual cores and old i5s, we had like 1080p resolution. And so for PlayStation 1, there are a lot of game boxes out there that can just be on native resolution and plays perfectly with no problem whatsoever. We're combining this with the DuckStation. So the result can be slightly different if you're going to be using a different emulator, but performance is just amazing. 4K render resolution, so if you want to experience the old school PlayStation games in a different settings, yeah, this is going to be absolutely great. Moving up to the PlayStation 2, we're having rendering resolution of 1080p. So not only we can even play PlayStation 2, we even have the option to upscale it to 1080p. And having some overall good performance. Of course, if you want to, you can also get into the 2K or some other crazy resolutions, but I just want to choose the safe route to see if we can have like PlayStation 2 on some overall perfect emulation. It depends also what kind of games you're playing. God of War is slightly more difficult to emulate, so we're going to be needing maybe a little bit tweaking there. But most games, what you can just actually see, this runs on great on the 4K resolution. By the way, I'm getting my ass kicked over here. The first problem we're having when having an older CPU and not a lot of cores to have or actually to work with emulation. And with PlayStation 3, we will see that it's going to be like a very long time when the game is actually loaded in. I've been testing it on AMD Ryzen's i9s, and those are like super fast, and loading times are sometimes even instant. So where we do have overall maybe good emulation, the loading times can be absolutely a horrible thing. So let's grab ourselves something to drink in the meantime. But actually getting into the game, you can see we do have overall great performance. So also the more demanding games, that is going to be a tweaking situation. We don't need to do any craziness when it comes to filtering whatsoever, because this is just pushing this device to the limit. But it's actually cool to see that we can play some PlayStation 3 games on an older i5. But so far so good. So when it comes to the overall performance, you know, it's fine for just simple emulation, even all the way to PlayStation 1, where this is like an older i5, you have i3, i5, i7s, if you have more cores, and even having like a brand new model when it comes to this, the ProDesk. In the future they're going to be like more affordable, we're going to be having a better onboard GPU. But the onboard GPU will have its limitations. That brings us actually to the second model over there. This is an 8th gen i5, and I must say that depending on the generation, some of them can become really expensive when it comes to Intel ones. So I will not go to the most, let's say, advanced version, because we're not going to be needing actually the onboard graphics card. So the later ones, I think it's called the Iris and something like, if you have like later generations, but those mini PCs are like getting really expensive. So we cannot use ourselves like a GPU like this, but we can actually use a slim model. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be adding that to the machine itself. And you will see that we do have some way better overall emulation performance only by using a simple onboard GPU. So we're going to be using today. So I already mentioned before, so getting a different HP PC, there are a lot of different generations, and with different generation also comes with a different price tag. I'm not going to be saying exactly how much you pay for it, because it depends where you're going to be looking, and sometimes you find these really cool bargains. I always keep pressing the wrong button. However, let's go to the information and let's see what we're going to be playing with today. So we're having a 2 terabyte image, so we have enough space to store all of our games. So the temperature 39 Celsius idle, and this has to do because of the ventilation and a massive cooling fan. This is one of the things I love about the HP PCs. So having the i5 8th generation or the 8600 running on 3.10 gigahertz, and actually CPU number is 6, what it says over here, and max frequency to 4300 megahertz. So when it comes to the GPU, we're having over here the Ultra HD Graphics 630, but we're going to be switching between the 1030 later on and trying to see what's the difference between, let's say, having an extra GPU, will this benefit, and is it going to be a great upgrade? But what can we play with Batocera? There's absolutely crazy amount of different systems that we can play. Of course, with the 8th generation i5 and the GPU, we will find some limitations. But in this video, we're going to be doing a quick overview of a couple of systems, but also going to be a little bit of an upscaling for the people who are interested. Because I think it's going to be very cool to see a lot of old school games, but also modern devices being played on this device. Of course, we can also implement Windows games, and that's one of the ways you can actually just implement new generation stuff. However, I think we need a better GPU CPU combination if you want to get into some crazy stuff. However, 3DO is one of the systems I think is interesting because we could play that on basic game box devices, and yeah, the old school stuff can be played on a potato nowadays, but also arcade here having more options. So I think that is going to be a lot of fun. However, let's do a quick overview and also do a little bit of a chit-chatting about adding an extra GPU in the mix. Oh crap, another problem. I noticed that the audio is completely messed up. Pressing start in the main menu will give you actually the main menu. Going to sound settings. In here we can adjust the volume settings if you want to. And next up, if you have no audio at all, what you need to do is going to the system settings. And in here we're going to be finding the video, but also the audio output. And the audio output, it's going to be, audio profile. And we're going to be setting it to a different output. It's going to be quite a little bit of a problem sometimes. We need to guess which one. I'm thinking getting the HDMI output, because that is going to be the one I'm going to be needing. So let's go and let's see if this fixes the issue. And you need to scroll through the different ones, let's say the different games, to see if it's going to be helping and pushing your audio to the certain, let's say, channel you want to. For example, headphone, HDMI, whatsoever. Start off with some arcade. With the arcade part, we do have thousands of freaking awesome games to play. With this PC, we can even play the games, the main Tekken ones, and also Killer Instinct, the stuff that we couldn't play on other, let's say, cheap game boxes. I think that is one of the cool things about this device. So let's try another game, one of my favorite MAME games, Blood Bros, but however, it doesn't boot up. So what we're going to be doing is holding the A button, going to the advanced game options over here, and then we're going to be setting it to a certain emulator. And let's see which one it was. I think it was like the MAME 78 Plus, so let's boot it up. And let's see if we're going to be booting up the game now. Sometimes you need to do it for certain games, you need to mess around with it. Nope, it was not the one. I have no idea sometimes. MAME 01039. Let's see if this is going to be fixing the boot problem. Hoping that we can actually play one of my favorite games. And nope, it's getting really annoying. It's getting really annoying now. We just have MAME. Okay, just use MAME. With the idea that we're missing out on good working ROM file, or is it just the emulator? Nope, it's the emulator. Weird. Wouldn't be surprised it's going to be the same emulator. However, with the automatic boot, it doesn't want to boot up into that. Doesn't matter. So, it seems to be working fine. Oh man, as a child I've been playing this game so much, and it's just a lot of fun to revisit these old school games and just have fun with it. So one of those many classic games that you really should check out. Just blow everything up. You can shoot at the can itself to getting extra bonus points, but of course you're getting shot like me if you're going to be too focused on that. Oh! There we go. That felt much better. But when it comes to the basic stuff, that will run just fine. Also when it comes to 8-bit, 16-bit. But still want to do a quick showdown with one of those games I love but also hate at the same time, because this is such a really difficult game. And emulation performance is going to be just fine in here. But do you really need a newer generation? No, because I had tested this on many dual cores, really old school CPU versions that run the old school 8-bit just fine too. Panasonic 3DO is another device I love to play on my original FZ10, but when it comes to, let's say, emulation, we can do different resolutions. So I'm bringing this now on 640 by 480, and yeah, that is, when I say rendering resolution upgrade, but just wanted to see what we can do. So we have been playing all kinds of different devices now, at least like arcade, NES, and you name it. But when it comes to this is a system that had a lot of cool hidden gems, and now we can actually play it fairly well on even higher resolutions on the original GPU. The bottom mapping is perfect, so when it comes to that, it's such a lot of fun playing this game. Yeah, come on. And if you wonder, does it run Doom? Yeah, it does. Oh yeah. Running Doom, you can do that on all kinds of wicked devices now. However, it's just fun. I love Doom for what it is. I did play it on my Sega 32X and many other devices, but of course this is just the port of the PC and the best one you can actually get. Love the bezels around it. You can still remember that having all kinds of PCs connected to each other, and this way we can just play cooperative or playing some death matches with Doom. Man, love this game, so much fun. I'm playing one of my favorite, let's say, beat 'em up games on the Sega CD. Yeah, that's one of those systems you don't find very often on really cheap game boxes. I mean, particularly those horrible game sticks. But this is absolutely a fun system with a couple of hidden gems. It's a system with not a lot of game titles. However, like Final Fight CD, Sonic CD, many ones that are absolutely awesome. I love to play these things on my original Sega and the CRT, but they're just fun to revisit very quickly into some emulation. And of course, having, in my opinion, maybe the best soundtracks of the Final Fight series. But how about all the other stuff in here? So when you're going to be looking into 16-bit, this is going to be running just fine. And it's just going to be an overall fun experience. One thing is a fact, if you're going to be grabbing too many rings of Sonic, he is going to be becoming super slow. I can't get up there! No! Ah! But let's get into some emulators and have some fun. So the next thing we're going to be doing is choosing the certain game to be testing, and Die Hard is one of those games I always love to check out. However, next thing we're going to be doing is holding the A button, then we're going to be advanced game options, choosing the different emulator, in this case the Yaban Shinshiro, and next up we're going to be doing a little bit of a rendering resolution. So it has been set to 4K, but we're going to be messing with it to see how far we can actually push it with the GPU, and if it has horrible performance, we can also implement the extra GPU like the NVIDIA to see if you're having any improvement. But Sega Saturn on 4K rendering resolution doesn't really need an extra powerful GPU. We can just run this on this, I think it's called the 630 onboard Intel GPU. That's kind of nuts if you think about it. So only downside I think of the Yaban Shinshiro emulator, that the overall audio quality is good, but it is quite low. So we need to tweak with that. However, if you're getting into this Die Hard and many Saturn games, 4K rendering resolution without any problem. So let's try this on some really high resolution, 3840, just to see how far we can push it. It dips down to 49. I'm quite surprised at the overall performance. Dipping to 45. But it would be a fun thing, 43 frames per second. But what you can actually do is just do the same game and implement the GPU of NVIDIA to see if this is going to be an upgrade, or at least a minor upgrade with the 1030 GT. Oh, this is such a fun game. So let's see how it performs now with a different GPU implemented. So I know for sure if you're having a different, let's say, CPU, GPU combination, so having a more powerful GPU can even do some more wicked stuff. But the overall performance is so much significant better now, where it struggles big time without the other GPU, or the onboard GPU actually. Now we can just have a lot of fun on full 60 FPS. And of course you can also do a little bit of tweaking with two-dimensional games to see if you can have higher resolution going on with, for example, two-dimensional games. Moving on to the Dreamcast with Sonic Adventure 2 with the same resolution actually. So this is going to be the resolution that we're going to be using with the same like the Atomic Wave. So let's get into the game, resulting in the same kind of overall frames per second. Where I think it's still playable. If you don't see the frames per second, I think it's going to be a still overall fun experience. I love it how the vibration also works on the controller, where you can just see it dipping. You do see the stuttering visuals even not looking at the frames per second. This game is even running more horrible than the Atomic Wave version, with dipping to 41 frames per second. But how much fun would it actually be to add the GPU now and to see what happens. And take note, depends on what kind of GPU you're going to be using, where the 1030 GT is not a great card in my opinion about it. There are way better options out there, but yeah, again, we are a limitation of the space inside of the case itself. That the performance boost is not that great. We do have like 50 frames per second now. Okay, so certain parts we do see an upgrade when it comes to that, but the overall performance is still okay when it comes to that. I was expecting way better performance now. So this part, previously we had like 40 frames per second. Yeah, you can see that we have indeed an increase of 10 frames here. Okay. Then I think I spoke too early when it comes to that. And again, I think if you're going to be using a GPU that is more powerful, we can just hit the 60 frames per second without any problems. Or of course getting a way newer generation Intel CPU or having an AMD Ryzen, because those APUs or GPUs on board are so great. So with PlayStation 1 we can do already some crazy upscaling with 4K rendering resolution. We had a minor dip to 41 frames per second, but that was only a minor dip in the beginning, but having a very stable overall frame rate on the onboard GPU. So where we have a great overall performance here, what we can actually try is to get ourselves a higher resolution and implement the GPU. But it's quite amazing to see that we can do so many cool overall rendering on just an onboard 630 GPU. There we have in the 43 dip. Well, let's see if it still dips if you're going to be implementing another GPU. I think it's going to be even more fun to check out. But let's move on to the Crash Bandicoot game with PlayStation 1. And the simple reason is that with the 4K we had overall great performance. And I can tell you, not want to push it further with the onboard chip. But now we have 11 times the resolution with the built-in GPU, and I got a TNT stuck on my head. Doesn't matter. So far no dips in having the stable 60 frames per second. And that is a very cool thing to see. So this is an example that with even a very cheap extra GPU implemented in, you can just have even higher resolutions in some of the games. And that was actually the clue of the experiment too, just see how far we can push it. And again, if you're having a way more powerful or better than a 1030 GT, we can even have the option maybe to put it on 12 times rendering resolution. And if you're fine with 4K, you can just use the onboard GPU. Just I wanted to check out if we can actually play some Tekken with rendering resolution on the onboard chip first. You can see that it struggles. It's running on 1080p rendering resolution. Ooh, it really has a little bit of struggle here and there, but I think that's going to be a great sweet spot to check out if we can also implement an extra GPU and see how far we can go then. So with PlayStation 2, I still want to put it on 1080p, just to see if we can even have now a better overall performance. I did notice a very minor hiccup, but you can just see that the performance is so much better now. So let's go with the flow and let's see if we can manage to clear this freaking stage without any dips whatsoever. You can just see on 1080p it really benefits. And if you're going to be implementing a more powerful GPU again, maybe you can even do a little bit of 4040p or 4K if you want to go fully, let's say, wild with this. But I'm quite satisfied with the 1030 GT with 1080p running resolution. So next up I wanted to check out when it comes to 10 times resolution. And with PlayStation Portable it looks so great, however it's running absolutely choppy, and that is a little bit of a downside. So the next thing I just wanted to see is like how far we can push it and what will this GPU extra going to be giving us. So you can see it runs like 27 frames per second. Frame skip can be set to off. Of course we can do a little bit of a 4K rendering resolution, but what's the fun about that? So let's see what happens if you're going to be implementing a GPU and do we having a big boost that we can actually play 10 times resolution. PlayStation Portable 10 times resolution, where it was completely unplayable on the onboard GPU. Let's see what happens now. So far so good. Even with the intro we had like an overall better performance, but it seems to be that the GPU with this tiny upgrade is more than enough to play this on 10 times resolution. Let's go a little bit further. Yeah, there we go. That's what I wanted to see. It still freaking struggles. So where we do have like an overall better performance, we still do a little bit of tweaking, or just leave it as this and live with the fact that we're having sometimes minor dips. But while I'm playing PlayStation Portable games on such a high resolution on a beautiful 1080p display, it's absolutely nuts. Oh, when there is an explosion you can see massive dips. And you can also put in the frame skip if you want to. We just wanted to see what happens as it is. Ooh, particularly the same spot again. So with the onboard chip you do have some okay performance. I just wanted to see what happens if we're going to be putting it on 920 by 4040. See the frame per second already dipped to 21. So yeah, that is not the way that we actually want to play. I don't really notice it visualize at this point. Maybe it's going to be stuttering later on in the game. But you can see it goes back to the 30 frames per second. So this is just great, and we can check out some other games, but I just want to focus what happens. So we do have a dip, but what we can try actually is do a little bit of a higher resolution and implement the GPU at this point to see what are the difference. And also I want to be pointing out, maybe I said it throughout the video a couple of times, depending what kind of GPU. I have the 1030 GT, is not a great card at all, but will give us maybe a little bit of a boost that we can actually play everything. Because that was the clue of this PC, that we can add a GPU to it to increase performance of the rendering resolution. Okay, so I just wanted to see what happens if we're going to be putting it on the highest resolution. On the onboard GPU I know that is not going to be having any positive effect and having a lot of problems. But with the N64, man, we have been so many, let's say, problems with cheap game boxes, but even on the highest setting of the resolution, that is just insane. We have great performance to that. So 5760 by 4320 or some kind, this is absolutely nuts. Of course we're going doing the crazy test with F-Zero GX. I love this game, by the way. It's the only game I play on my GameCube at this moment. But you can see it struggles. You know, it's hitting the 60 FPS. But sometimes it does struggle, and I just wanted to see what happens if we're going to be implementing a GPU. I think it will have a big, massive impact on this particular resolution now, but maybe we can also do a little bit of an upscaling to see if you're having 1080p with the GPU, and maybe if you're having more powerful GPU that it has way better performance, you even can put it on 4K resolution. But you can see it does like a lot of dips, even 720p. Oh. So we need to lower it to 480p to get like a stable overall performance. And this time with the Dolphin, where we did have an overall, oh crap, forgot to use, I was trying to use the D-pad. But with the implemented of the GPU on 1080p, so even having higher resolutions, it runs absolutely smooth. I've been messing with it. We can try a little bit of a higher resolution, but then we're going to be having the same result with minor hiccups. If you don't mind it, you can do it. And of course, the F-Zero GX isn't a very difficult game to emulate compared with other ones. So having like a basic game, two-dimensional stuff, you have even better result with this particular GPU. And again, GPU upgrading, a faster GPU will also means having overall better upscaling. So nevertheless, when you're going to be looking at the GPU, you can have some really cool overall performance now, and this is going to be a little bit more expensive. So, but if you're going to be removing this bad boy over here, and we're just going to be getting ourselves like this massive PC. Let's say you don't care about the space, we're going to be adding a GPU like this. The performance are absolutely great. And where I actually picked up the 9th generation, you can get yourself a little bit older, maybe a little bit newer, it's all depending on the budget. But if you're going to be adding like a GTX, this is a 1050, so very cheap actually to pick up. You have like the 1060 Ti and other models. If you're going to be having a better GPU, what I would not recommend, because the performance, I will show you, it's great. You need to set it up. So you're going to be needing the keyboard if you need to add games and stuff like that. So there's something you need to take consideration. But for now, I just want to do a little bit shit about the nerdy mode and to see what we can actually do. Still messing with the buttons, okay? ASPA for once. So you're going to be having over here some information about everything, temperatures and everything else. So we are using the i5 9th generation over here, and it's kind of interesting. It doesn't actually show the GPU at this point because, you know, yeah, that's really weird because it's actually in here. I'm using the HDMI of the GPU, but we do see OpenGL and Vulkan support. We do have like CPU number and 6 over there. So specification wise, this is going to be a lot of fun. Let's double check if the audio. So I think it's been set to HDMI, but it does actually say over here Intel. So I'm curious what is going on over here. So what we're going to be doing is UI settings. Can we actually turn on the background music, if there is even like background music? But if you're going to be looking into the audio output, you can see they're having all kinds of different models. It was set to HDMI, but that's the one we're not going to be needing. What we're going to be needing is using, you can see having all kinds of NVIDIA. That's really weird. So we can do two things. You can put it on auto. It does actually say we need to reboot the system. And let's see if we're going to be having audio itself. But what is kind of funny that the HP machine come with a built-in speaker, and yep, it actually uses that freaking internal speaker. So yeah, we do need actually force them into like the NVIDIA HDMI outputs. Oh man, we said again. The first thing that we actually did now is going into, let's say, the update. Yep, update over there, and we're going to be checking for updates. We did that, we started the update and rebooted the system, and now we're going to be running on the version 42 as making this video. And the reason why, because now with information, yeah, we finally do have the NVIDIA being installed and recognized. So let's see if we can force the auto the overall audio output, though let's say using the NVIDIA, but we do have the GTX 1050 over here. It's full HD resolution, and yeah, this is going to be epic because now we can push it to the limit. But let's fix the freaking audio. Oh, let's see if we can fix it somewhere. So after messing around, I managed to get the audio to work. Let me show you what I actually did. Oh crap, I was messing with the controls. So running some PC Engine, you know, when it comes to these simple games, you don't actually even need the big GPU. Wait, you don't even need a massive case like this. You can do that just fine, you know, with those other, like say, tiny HP ProDesk devices. So I want to focus, I will try out a couple of games, but also another thing I've noticed, like the visual output, having an external GPU is absolutely beneficial to the overall gaming experience, because I do have the idea that everything looks so much better and vibrant because of the GPU, of course. An onboard GPU is all fun and game, but nothing beats like a real powerful AMD, or in this case NVIDIA GPU externally. So regarding the audio levels and everything, so you need to go to system settings. In my case, it was a little bit of a hassle, but yeah, you need to put the audio output on auto, and in my case, we're going to be having the HDA, NVIDIA Digital Serial HDMI output, because we're actually going to be using HDMI at this point. So everything is set up, and I think I need to crank up the volume over here. Let's put it on 90. The weird thing is, like, at first I was messing with it, looking or actually listening to the background music, but I have no idea why my background music doesn't do anything. You know, I was just testing it and I was like, why does this freaking thing doesn't do anything? Okay, let's shut it down. Let's shut it back on. Nope, background music is completely messed up. well, whatever. Let's get into the game. The audio was a little bit low when it comes to that, so I just wanted to see what's going on. Let's go with Game Boy. I love the cover art, everything has been scraped. Let's get into some Adventure Island of the Game Boy Classic. Boop, 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 boop. So regarding the bezels, you can always change it out if you don't like it at all. I think it was pretty cool. And like I mentioned before, it makes no sense actually playing this on this PC because this runs without any problem whatsoever. So another thing I just wanted to deep dive into is of course N64, because this is such a pain in the ass to actually run on most of these devices. So now with some more GPU power, we can do some pretty cool things. So first of all, let's get into the pressing A. We're going to be having the extra option, advanced game options over here. And yeah, we can mess around with rendering resolution. So you know what I'm going to be doing? Let's put this thing on 1920 by 4040. And let's leave it to the, let's see, the auto emulator. But we can mess around with this later on if we want to. And let's boot it up and let's see how Cruising USA runs on higher resolutions. And the reason I actually wanted to try this out, yeah, we're running actually on, so say, high resolution or full HD. And I think it's pretty cool, but let's see what we can do. So it's also like a question like how compatible is the GPU with Batocera. So we're going to be running just a mid-range graphics card. You can see on 30 frames per second because this game was, I think, is locked. But it's going to be, let's see, it's going to be dipping. And again, if you're going to be getting yourself on 1060 or something else, then it also has support when it comes for the power supply. Yeah, you can have some insane cool performance. But in this way, I just wanted to showcase what can you do with some simple things. Ooh, there we go. But let's go crazy, Let's go crazy with some Golden Eye. And let's see if we have the game over here. Golden Eye. Let's hold it. All right. The A button. Advanced game options. Let's go with rendering resolution. Let's go with, don't go too crazy, 9 times, 2880 by 2160. All right, and let's leave it over there, and let's boot up the game. Let's see how far we can push this thing. Take consideration that this game is super difficult to actually emulate. And again, we can still mess around with emulators, so we have like weird glitches, but I don't care about that. I just wanted to see out of the box. Let's put on the auto, let's see how far we can push this crazy game. And again, take consideration that we're going to be having like the option to lower the resolution, but I just wanted to see, to have the idea like the frames are so much better, and that actually shows in the right corner. Running 20 frames, and again, like we can lower it, but this upscaling situation is pretty cool. So it's now hitting 30. Let's go to a more difficult part, more crowded. So the overall frames are quite stable. I wondered if we put it in like a high resolution, but I think this is a great showcase what we can do having like a 9th generation i5 in combination with a GPU. Like it has like a slow dip now, with a lot of stuff going on. So let's look into some GameCube rendering over here. So rendering resolution, let's go with 4K rendering resolution on this simple one when it comes to, let's say, the GPU we're using. And let's start some crash. Ooh, but let's boot it, let's see how far we can push it out. What does it actually do when not having the right files? But despite that, we're going to be having a low powered, simple, let's say an older 9th generation i5 combined with an GTX 1050. It's crazy. You can run this on 4K rendering resolution, and the GPU is not even used 100%. So meaning we can even push this a little bit further if you want to. But again, this looks really nice. Rendered to 4K rendering resolution. having all kinds of different kind of games you can just play, and I can tell you we tested out a couple of them. It's always fun if you're going to be accidentally pressing the button. Okay, so open Beats of Rage with all kinds of very cool custom games that you can just play. The unfortunate, depending on what kind of, let's just, yeah, what kind of image you have. This is absolutely one big mess with all kinds of weird crap on it. Let's see what's going on. Having Beats of Rage, Art of Fighting, Boar Remix 3. But you know, one of the things I wanted to check out if it even boots up, because this is like a general problem. Oh, I already tested a couple of things, but some of them didn't even boot up. So that is quite unfortunate. Oh man, they've created some really wicked stuff. But I think it's also the open Boar engine. My favorite one is always going to be the Street of Rage, let's say Remake Edition. But does it play Doom? Yes, it absolutely does play Doom. Let's see if I can start the game, because there was some weird thing going on. The controls are all messed up. Oh. Yeah, it's a weird configuration, but woo, turbo, let's run. And also this seems to be working fine. Can I reset it back to the menu like that? Yep, fairly easy. There's some weird thing going on. Super tux card. Let's see that if it's going to be booting up. But again, if you just love these games, you don't really need to have all kinds of, let's say, GPUs added. Oh man, what a mess. That is what we're going to be having to deal with if you're going to be building yourself images. Oh boy. So Atomic Wave, another interesting system. What is it? Even more interesting, there's also some random stuff in here. This is not only Atomic Wave, that's clear. Faster than speed. Oh, that was a cool game. But what you can maybe do, even if you're going to be going to the advanced options over here, you can mess around with the emulator. Let's leave it to auto. I think some of the emulators do have the option to actually do a little bit of an upscaling if you want to. And it doesn't boot up. And I'm not surprised, to be honest. So let's see what's going on. We have also kind of messages. So the overall image I'm actually using now is super incomplete. And that's quite annoying. See, stuff doesn't even boot up. Yep. And that's the thing that we need to deal with too. So it's kind of a mess when it comes to that, like a gazillion double games. Oh man, I really hate it. Look at this. That's absolutely a freaking waste of space, having 3 games. And maybe there are different regions, but they make no sense actually just putting duplicate games. But let's see what's going on if you're going to be switching between different emulators. I just wanted to showcase what you can actually do if the auto fails. Japan Shinchiro. And this way you can just go through different emulators, because the auto function does sometimes fail, or it is indeed not working at all. With all kinds of different ones. Let's see, Chronos, Japan Shinchiro, we tried out. We have the Beetle. I think that's the most heavy one to actually have for emulation performance. Let's see if something is going to be happening. No, so it's not going to be happening anytime soon. Oh, we do have like another one. It can also be the game itself. Let's see, we have like this weird one. GMIR, okay. Let's switch it to that. And I think it's like none of the emulators work. So what I hate about these, let's say, wicked freaking images is that we're having this problem so many times. I do wonder like if this is like a general game issue, or is this like going to be an overall problem with the emulator itself. Yeah, see. So let's move to a different kind of image, because I am kind of a little bit done with the overall configuration and everything of the previous one. So let's go with the Dreamcast over here and let's go be having some fun with it. So when it comes to, let's say, the Canon Spike situation and all kinds of cool games, let's go with upscaling if we want to. So the weird thing is, like with the Dream emulator, the one I really love, doesn't have support for that. And I think that's to do because of the version that's on there. But let's see which one can actually do a little bit of cool, like upscaling. Let's see, rendering resolution 4480 by 3360. Let's go with that. And let's see if we can actually push it to the maximum. So I have been messing around with these things for quite a long time now, and I can tell you that when it comes to playing Sega Dreamcast, sometimes you will be surprised how overall good or bad the performance is. You can see that we're not hitting like 40 frames in the beginning. So one of the things I'm always a little bit surprised by, if you're going to be using, let's say, such a basic GTX card, how great the overall performance can be. And in-game we're hitting 60 frames per second on crazy, let's say, upscaled resolution, so we don't need, like, say, some insane expensive PC. But let's move to some other platforms. Moving on to 4K rendering resolution on the PlayStation. I mean the PlayStation 1, and there is no problem whatsoever running this. So I can see you can even, this was 9x resolution. I think there is even an option for 16x or something crazy. So if you want to mess with that, I think the PlayStation 1 generation is one of those generations that are fun, but they're not graphical, the most impressive ones. But again, if you're doing a little bit of a 4K upscaling, I think it's pretty sweet. But that makes of course wondering, like, how will it be when it comes to, say, other games, but also when it comes to PlayStation 2. Because I don't think we're going to be having a problem with playing some PlayStation 1 games at this point. You know, whatever. Let's go to the PlayStation 2. So moving on into the PlayStation 1, have been set the resolution to 4K. Let's see how it goes with some burnout gaming. I'm really curious. So we're running out, say, full speed in the menu, but let's see what's going on. It actually recognizes the GTX 1050 in the emulator, so that's good. And we're just running like a full speed 4K PlayStation 2. Yeah, this is no problem whatsoever, so I think that is pretty sweet. So let's take a closer look at some old school arcade. And let's go with arcade itself. Let's see if we do have any problems with, let's say, playing this on this particular CPU, GPU. I can still remember that when I actually played this on some basic stuff from China, we had like a lot of problems. But we're going to be just playing PlayStation 3 on native resolution. I think the most interesting part was actually having PlayStation 1 and 2 on 4K rendering resolution and sometimes even higher. Let's see if we do have some weird things with screen tearing or other problems. So far so good. So yeah, the emulation performance is really enjoyable. And again, like, depending on what kind of emulator version you're running, I've actually installed the latest Sierra. That is very important if you're going to be doing setups like these. There's some weird glitching. I actually did the boost. Or was that me? No, it's like the glitching. So but you can see, like, when it comes to the overall configuration, yeah, this is pretty cool. We can go to the home menu, mess around with settings if you want to. Not going to be doing that. So PlayStation 3 emulation is pretty good and absolutely enjoyable. With the PlayStation Portable or the PPSSPP emulator, we're going to be putting this on rendering resolution 10 times. Let's put frame skipping on off, and let's see heads-up display. Let's go performance, and let's boot up the game. Maximum PlayStation Portable, yeah! I don't see any problems going on. Full 60 frames at the moment. Let's make a save state. It's going to be convenient. Particularly, we're going to be testing out some more stuff, more hardware. We do have some screen tearing going on, so that's something we need to look into to see what settings. But for now, we're going to be checking out some performance. It's actually running an OpenGL. Oof. Ooh. That was completely messed up. So the screen tearing is really annoying. We can go to settings. We need to actually set this to Vulkan, but I think I cannot do that from here. Normally we need to actually get into the Sierra. Let's go with the load state over here. Let's go checking out with Vulkan. I just want to quickly, like, switch it out. But if you're going to be looking into PlayStation Portable, also here we have, like, some amazing performance too. And I think this is such a fun overall experience. But just having all kinds of different emulators running on really good over, let's say, high-end settings. But again, if you find some minor, let's say when you're going to be finding some minor hiccups, I think it's more like an emulator problem than actually having like some hardware. Like 54, we can of course we can lower it if you want to. Haha, I got a shield. But yeah, this runs pretty good. The conclusion is, in the end, we're going to be having all kinds of ProDesk models. But the question remains, which one is the best one for you? If you don't care about upscaling and everything else, you can just pick yourself like some simple HP ProDesk, and they're not like really expensive at all. If you want to tinker with a GPU but don't have, let's say you don't have a lot of space for in your living room, you can actually get yourself like this semi-slim model and you can still implement a GPU, but the GPUs are going to be a little bit more difficult to find. But if you don't care about space, you can get yourself the big boy and you can slap in like a GTX card or something else you want to and have some insane performance. Thank you all for watching. Let me know in the comments what is your favorite PC, and it will be great to see you in the next video.